Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly, and we're back with another Southwest Virginia fishing report with Matt Reilly. How you doing, Matt?
Doing great, Marvin. How are you?
As always, just trying to stay out of trouble, and also, as always take a quick look at your weather. And you're warming up, but it's going to be kind of windy and rainy, so you kind of are getting to that edge of early spring weather.
Yeah, it's definitely starting to think like March coming in like a lion here. At least the way it's been the last week or so. We've just been in this high pressure bubble where it's been high sun and windy most days, and kind of hitting those seasonal average highs like low 40s to 50 degrees, which is pretty good. But like I say, this time of year, it's either cold or it's windy. So hopefully we get a window of some calmer days. Maybe some cloud cover would be really nice right about now.
Got it. And so, what are you seeing on the water on the muskie front?
Things have been good. They were pretty chewy last week, thankfully. But like I said, we got blown off the river late last week with white capping and high winds. And but outside of that, we've been doing pretty good. Seeing lots of fish, catching a few fish for some folks who gotten a couple of first muskies in the boat in the last week or two. But things are cold. We're still looking at like mid to high 30s water temperatures, depending on what the couple day temperature trend is. Just like any kind of fishing in the wintertime, we're still working those temperature gradients and warming trends and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I would imagine, as we always say, the trout fishing is the trout fishing, right? So, low and slow is the order of the day, and it's probably, if it's that cold, you probably haven't even been trying to pry any smallmouth out of their wintering holes, have you?
No. We do have, there's a little bit of opportunity for some smallmouth fishing in East Tennessee, where we've got some warm water influence that we got into a little bit last week, just to kind of spice things up a little bit. And then, on the mountain stream front, things have been, again, it just kind of depends on what the trend is. Some mornings, some days been really, really slow. If we've had a couple of days of real cold nights. Just hunting for warm water, fishing later in the day, close to the bottom is always good. And then our tailwater trout fishing down in Tennessee has been pretty good as of late too. We've got brown trout coming off of the post spawn period, moving, kind of back into their normal areas, for, headed towards spring. That's been good when we haven't been able to get on the new to musky fish. So we're getting on towards spring where we're going to have a lot of options coming at us soon. And that little bit of rain we're looking at next week should only help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about having something to look forward to, got a question from Will Travis, and Will wants to know how you like to fish your crayfish patterns for smallmouth.
Yeah. So I may be in the minority in this, but my favorite way to fish a crayfish pattern is with number one with a floating line, which a lot of people are tempted to fish sink tips and intermediate lines and stuff like that. I really don't feel like you have the strike detection with those kinds of lines. Things get just really kind of dampened. Even though, like with an intermediate line, you generally have a core that has a relatively low stretch. If you're getting really soft bites, a lot of times I don't feel like I can really feel through that line. The way I tend to fish a crayfish fly is with the floating line, and then generally just a 9-foot fluorocarbon leader, generally 0x or 1x. And, any crayfish fly worth its salt should have some weight in it to get it down on the bottom, riding the point up. And I generally make a cast, and to some degree, I'm gonna mend my line right off the bat to basically to make my line not straight. I'm trying to make some form of a bend in the last like 5 feet of my fly line, and what that allows me to do is have sort of a visual cue for that fly catching on the bottom. So if when that fly inevitably gets down, like it should, hit the rock, you'll see that line kind of just start to curl and like track towards that spot where it's stuck. And in that case, you can either give it just another big mend, which will hop that fly off the bottom, or you can just give it a short little like 6-inch strip, which will hop it off the bottom, and then you can remend. But just keeping that fly line on the surface and keeping that little crook in your fly line gives you the ability to watch it, for any kind of bounce or hard stop or twitch or something like that. And generally, that's how you detect a fish, and then you can give it a good hard hook set. That's how I prefer to fish them. Like I said, you can fish them on sink tips and intermediate, but in terms of really sort of having that visual cue for, okay, my fly's on the bottom, it's fishing where it needs to fish, and then being able to watch something to detect a strike, I really, really prefer a floating line for that.
Yeah, got it. And how do you like to animate your retrieve?
So like I said, you can, for the most part, especially I do probably, 90% of my crayfish fly fishing between, the middle of March, early to mid-March through, certainly the first week of June, but probably, through the end of April. And so generally you've got higher water, swifter water, and you need to be down on the bottom. So first thing I do is throw the fly out, get it down to the bottom, and then you really don't want to be just stripping the fly through the water. You want to be bouncing it along the bottom, letting it kind of settle into crevices and stuff like that. If you're properly fishing a crayfish fly, you're going to lose a lot of them, unfortunately. You can go back and get them, but they need to be fishing on the bottom. And then, like I said, you can either, once it hits bottom, you can either throw a big mend, and generally just, the movement that you impart on your fly by moving the fly line will basically just hop that fly off the bottom and let it kind of settle back down. Or, if you don't have, current or some condition that makes mending a lot a good idea, then you can just do, sort of short little strips, or, sometimes I'll do a little bit of like, almost like a stack mend, like throwing just picking your rod tip up, like you're jigging a streamer or something, and just throwing like a foot of slack into your line. Something it'll just bump that fly like 6 inches and make it hop up off the bottom, is good. And that's another, presentation, advantage for a floating line, because, if you have a crayfish or a 9-foot leader on a floating line and the fly settles down to the bottom, and then you give it a 6-inch strip, it's going to strip, or it's going to hop towards the surface versus, if you're fishing it on a sink tip or something like that, it'll tend to come straight across the bottom. And I think you tend to get stuck more often that way. And it's not necessarily fishing as much.
Yeah, got it. And folks, we love questions on the articulate fly. You can email them to us. You can DM us on social media or drop them in the comments on our social media posts. And if we use your question, I'll send you some articulate fly swag. And we're in a drawing for some cool stuff from Matt at the end of the season. And, Matt, like we always do, we want to know what you're writing for the Rural Virginian this week.
Yeah. So this week, the column coming out is about I actually wrote it a couple weeks ago, and they got a little bit behind on the production schedule. So I may have already said this, but it's just it's about the general like bird movement patterns that we see surrounding the river in the wintertime. You know, when we hit those like really kind of basement air temperatures in late January generally, a lot of the still waters in the region freeze up, and so you'll see a waterfowl migration from the still waters to the river. And so all of a sudden we just start seeing all kinds of different ducks on the river. And then we actually start seeing a movement of bald eagles too, following one, you know, open water, and two, you know, waterfowl, because they'll eat waterfowl too. So there's a little bit of a discussion on a little bit of a naturalist event that we see every year on the river time coming out this week.
Yeah, very neat. And I know you've been booking Smalley days like crazy. You want to let folks know kind of what you have available and how to get in touch with you and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, there's a couple dates still available for like early pre-spawn stuff in March, and then there's maybe like 2 dates in April and like 2 dates in May, and other than that, we're looking at kind of late spring, June, and then into early summer at this point.
Well, there you go. Well, you know, folks, you owe it to yourself to get out there and catch a few. Tight lines, everybody. Tight lines, Matt.
All right. Thanks, Marvin.